talked a little bit. Oh, thank you, because I always forget. Thanks for doing that, Kate. Um, so we had talked a little bit about the format for all of this, and tonight, instead of doing a kind of a presentation, I'm going to do a bit of an interview with Dr. Greenberg, and we'll have some conversation there. But I would really like a lot of, uh, uh, of questions from all of you. And of course, if you're a student of mine, you know I give you a little bit of extra credit for any questions that I use. And so I'll have the chat running here, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. And if there are some things that come up that look interesting, I'm sure there will be. I'll offer those to Bob, and then maybe at the end we might have some time to just all talk too as well. Sound good? All right, good. We'll try that. Do you remember James Lipton, the actor studio, Bob?
I don't.
I never saw that show.
No,
Yeah.
I remember Peggy Lipton from the Mod Squad.
Oh no, there was this guy James Lipton. He goes inside the actors' studio, and he would give these one words, right? You know, what is your favorite color, right? And then it'd be a favorite
and then I
actor.
have to do my method.
No,
Right.
I thought maybe I thought, you know, what is your favorite note, you know, and then you could expound on a B flat, for example, for us, or whatever that
I would have said G string. But
well, let's start out. I don't know if this is a hard question or an easy question, but how about this? Because and I know maybe we get into Carmen a little bit because that's where our focus has been. But why study music? What would you tell a student who?
How old a student?
Let's say a college student, and let's say the college student is an engineering major or is a culinary arts major, and why should we study art or music?
Oh, I would make it simply benefit driven. There are few things in our world that can give the kind of pleasure, insight, and gravity that music can. I mean, we all have our favorite music. I always say that there's two different kinds of music. There's the music we grew up listening to when we came of sexual age while we were teenagers, because that's our music. And whoever you are, that music represents who you were at the pivotal time of your life. And then there's everything else. The everything else is as significant, as wonderful, as fascinating, and as meaningful as that music we grew up listening to when we were 13, 14, 15, and 16. Why would we not want that pleasure in our life? Now, if you're a culinary arts person, this is an easy sell, because culinary arts people are all about taste, sensual experience, realizing that nonverbal arts can go above and beyond verbal arts. Engineers, okay, you got to work on engineers a little bit, but what's life all about? You know, where do we get our pleasures from? We are hardwired to make music. Music is something our species created in order to organize activity, in order to create a sense of timelessness, in order to make worship possible. It's a basic organizational aspect to everything we do. So I would say it's a physical phenomenon as well as an intellectual and artistic phenomenon. And it's one of the things that makes us human. And some of the greatest art created by our species is musical art. And to deny ourselves that is to deny ourselves one of the basic heritages that we've got. And I would say life is way too short to live it without tunes. And frankly, any kind of music will do. I don't differentiate in my teaching. I have found the older I get, the more useless labels are, the more destructive they are, the more walls they create without admitting people in. There are different kinds of music with different information content, written at different times, created in different places. All of it is equally valid, and when approached intelligently, equally enthralling. So I would say, what, you got other things in your life that's going to give you all of this for free? I mean, the internet now will give us anything we want whenever we want. So it's just one of the best things about being human.
Great answer. It's one of those questions that I have to think about every once in a while with my own students.
Right.
And fair enough. I mean, I think we all took those courses in college where we said, well, why should we be doing this? So what's that all about? And how does that contribute to where I'm going to go in my life? And sometimes I'll get a student who says, just tell me what I have to do so I can check those boxes and get
Right.
this over
Right.
with.
How do I get it music out of here? When I was a grad student at Cal, teaching as a TA, it was Music 27,
Mm.
Tunes for Goons. Every school's got one, and
Yeah.
breadth requirement. And I hated the way that thing was taught. I mean, we'd have 300 or 400 students sitting there right after lunch in Hearst Hall. After lunch is the worst time to teach anything, of course, because people have just eaten and your blood sugar is all crazy and none of that blood is in your brain. And you've got to work really hard to teach a course like that. And I observed these professors just not teaching it in a way that related to the students.
Mm.
So I think that's a lot of it too, is finding vocabulary and finding a repertoire and a way of, as you say, relating the music to the greater human experience. Music does not exist unto itself any more than any other human activity exists by itself.
Mm.
And find as many different fields to cross-reference as possible. Find a way, if you can, to intrigue students, both artistically and intellectually. I have found that by the time you're in college, if you do a halfway decent job presenting a kind of broad-based information in a way that's compelling, your students will eat it up. I'm sure you've had that same experience. I'm not going to get on the issue of questionable teaching, but I think that's more of a problem than the music is.
All right. Well,
Drop
we
the
know
needle
you.
courses.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we know you as a music historian. Of course, you have a lot of experience as a composer, as we looked at your bio here, and as a pianist, I know as well. You studied piano and all that. And I have to admit something to you. As we were emailing back and forth in the beginnings of these negotiations to get you to give us an hour of your Wednesday night, I had written, I think, in a bio that we had put on a website, famous musicologist Dr. Robert Greenberg, and you sent me a message back pretty quickly and said, I'm a music historian, not a musicologist. As you know, those are very different things. And I nodded my head and stroked my beard as any professor would do, And then I thought, I'm not really sure I do know what the difference is. And so I'm going to admit my ignorance and have you enlighten me.
Well, musicology is a specific discipline. It's a study of various aspects of not just music history, but bibliography. A musicologist is someone, a grad student in musicology, is someone who's going to take a slice of music history or some arcana and make it that person's life work. I'm a generalist. I didn't do that. I didn't get a degree in musicology. I got my degrees in composition. Musicology is its own thing. And, frankly, it's a high-end specialization. I'm not specialized. I'm a total generalist. I don't teach music I don't like. That's another thing about musicology. It's a discipline grounded in criticism, where it's necessary not just to embrace what you like, but to destroy what you don't. For the musicologists out there, if you're hearing me, please don't hate. Just accommodate. All right. I'm a composer. I only talk about the music I love because I don't need professionally to denigrate anything. So it's a very different approach that I take. And it's not a professional approach, it's a personal approach. When I look at a piece of music, I'm not thinking about a broad historical or small historical issues. I'm thinking, first of all, what was the composer thinking about when he or she wrote this, and why did he or she write this? I mean, I'm looking at it like a composer. I'm looking at it like a thief. What can I steal? How can I adapt some idea here for my own music? It's a very different approach. It's a music-based approach rather than a historical-based approach. From there, I spread out to the generalized history, but again, always generalized. So I know a lot about a lot, whereas a musicologist knows a lot about a very thin slice. And it's just a different, it's a different discipline. And I would not ever want to intrude upon that discipline by calling myself something I'm not. So that's why I did that with you, Steve. I mean, to be honest with you, if it's someone out there in the general community, you can call me whatever you want, as long as it's a four-letter word.
I think you're being very humble.
No, I'm being realistic, but thank you, Susan.
Yeah, I think the musicologist should take you on. I think they should, give you an honorary membership in the.
I fear, and now again, because we're among friends, since I'm among friends, I fear my success in the field has actually created a certain degree of animosity between myself and certain members of the academic community in musicology. So I think actually the last thing that's likely to happen is for me to be given an honorary title like that.
Well, you're a great storyteller. So how are you keeping yourself then busy in our shelter in place time? I know you do a lot of lecture series and probably a lot of pre-concert lectures for major orchestras and things of that sort. And a lot of those kinds of opportunities, I imagine, are on hold for a bit for you. Well, and I also know that you're spending quite a bit of time writing. So how do you structure your day, and what as a composer and pianist and everything else that you do?
To a certain degree, I've been fortunate. I left my teaching job at the conservatory in San Francisco back in 2001 in order to make these courses for the Great Courses, the teaching company. So I've been working at home primarily for almost 20 years. So I've got a great home studio. I've got a really great library behind me. I've got my concert grand piano is sitting here. So I've got everything I need here. So my life hasn't changed that much, except for the fact that my work all dried up. Sadly, yeah, I was traveling 3 weekends a month and doing a lot of speaking, and all of that's gone out. So instead, I'm doing a lot of blogging, a lot of vlogging on a site called Patreon, which is a subscription site. And I've been building my subscription base, which means I'm making up for some of the lost income that way. And I'm using the time to compose. Ordinarily, I maybe have time to write 1 or 2 pieces a year. I've written 3 pieces already this year. I've wrote some preludes for a wonderful pianist named Lynn Shugren, who just premiered them online a couple of weeks ago. I wrote some 6 etudes for piano. I wrote a piano concerto for piano and string orchestra, and I'm working on a piece for viola and piano right now. So that's a pleasure. Having just a little time in the cracks instead of traveling, that's what I'm doing. Then I have 2 small kids. I have 2 grown-up kids, but I have 2 younger kids who are on Zoom school right now, and that takes some parental energy to tend to. So actually, I'm busier now, for whatever it's worth, than I ever was, than I actually want to be. And that's good, because if I had time to think about what's going on, the steam would start coming out of my ears. So I keep busy. I keep very busy.
As a composer, who are your influences? Who could we listen to that would maybe be interesting to you?
Everybody. You know, and I say that sincerely. I'm often asked, who's your favorite composer? And my response is flip, but it's true. I'm a compositional slut. I like whoever I'm with at a given moment. Of course, it's the usual suspects, all those dead Germans and Austrians, and all those wonderful dead Russians, all the way through Shostakovich, Stravinsky, of course, Schoenberg, where and when I went to school, these were bastions of 12-tone and slow composition. And Schoenberg was considered the conservative among them. And to say, grew up piano. I was a jazz pianist, making a small living in New York as a jazz pianist in my early 20s. Jazz is a huge influence on me. I still play for fun, and I'm a Steinway artist as a jazz piano player. So it's just, that's the thing about being a musician today. there's so much stuff out there, and there's so much extraordinary music to listen to and to be influenced by. So I would say it's a real big mix, a little of everything. And what it boils down to for me is my music's very rhythmic. I like to feel that it swings. It's got that energy from playing in rock bands when I was a kid and jazz bands when I got older. I'd like to feel that I have integrity. I've worked really hard to hone my technique. I don't waste my notes. I don't waste an audience's time. That's really important. But in terms of the influences, it would be easier to say what's not influenced me than what has.
Interesting question. Yeah, what composer is overrated?
Do you really want me to answer that?
Yes, yeah, that's more fun, isn't it?
Well, John Adams. Let's just.
I
know,
I can see Susan here.
I'm sorry. Well, see, I have a problem with certain kinds of formula music, where if you lay out X number of parameters and you let them run, the piece is done. That's the problem I have with a lot of serial music. It's a problem I have with a lot of, I don't like to use the term minimalism because it doesn't do justice to the music, but it's any kind of music that's based on a process you have to be very careful not to let the process take over and not to let each piece more or less sound like the last piece.
Maybe I can stop you there for just a second, because I think probably a lot of people here don't know what serial music or process and composing looks like, and maybe what even minimalism in music looks like. So if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Minimalism is a musical movement that began in the early 60s. Part of it was a reaction to the hardcore post-World War II modernism of the academic community here in the United States. Minimalism combines the steady beat of rock and roll and jazz with a very non-European, non-Western way of musical thinking. Here in the West, we have been writing music for the last 300 or 400 years that assumes certain structures and assumes certain chord progressions that proceed from rest to tension back to rest. And in developing these musical forms based on this harmonic concept of stasis, activity, stasis, we've created what's called narrative music, music that seems to progress from point A to point B to point C and then back to point A. That's what we would call Western narrative music, music that would tell a story and that would traverse a certain arc. Asian musics generally don't do that. They're much more meditative, based more on cycling through repeating patterns. This is true in most North Indian music. It's certainly true in Balinese or Javanese gamelan music. It's true in many cultures. Music serves a very different purpose. Music is mantra, music as a meditative resource that opens our minds to a divine influence. So the minimalists were fascinated. I mean, Terry Riley studied Indian music and extensively. Steve Reich studied African music and Indian music, ditto Philip Glass, Indian music. And so they created a music that uses small ideas that are repeated and altered very slightly over time over a steady throbbing beat. And it's a fascinating amalgam. And some of this music is extraordinary. I mean, I have to say I'm a huge Terry Riley fan, and I'm a huge Steve Reich fan. Given this impulse of repetition, they've created these startlingly different works. And they've shown these amazing artistic developments. So that's what minimalism is. But the danger with that is it's a process. That is, you lay out, okay, I have a melody that's 20 notes long. And every time the melody is repeated, one note's going to be changed. And over time, it'll be a different note each time. So over time, the music will evolve. That's a very, by the way, flippant way of describing how a piece works, but kind of, it's how it often works. Once you lay out the ideas, the actual execution is almost secondary, isn't it? It's just, okay, yeah, we're going to change one note each repetition and blah, 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 blah. So it just plays itself. Serial music would seem to be the opposite, but it's the same thing. That is, you come up with these very arcane formulas, formulas for pitch, formulas for rhythm, formulas for articulation, formulas for dynamics. And then you engineer these different matrices to basically, once the process starts, again, the piece writes itself. What if at a certain moment an F sharp would sound better than that G natural? Well, you can't put a F sharp in there because the formula demands a G natural. So it's conceptual art, right? What's more important is the idea of the piece than its actual execution in real time. And that can be very problematic if you're trapped in a seat for an hour listening to one of these pieces. I can't tell you how many times I prayed to God to take me. I'm done. If I had had a toilet paper roll, I would have written my will out. Luckily, we don't hear that kind of music in concert a whole lot anymore. It served its purpose of purging the mind of romanticism and nationalism in the years after the war. But the problem with process music is it doesn't respond to the moment. And only a certain kind of composer can write that and sound convincing. So back to John Adams. I know John. I think he's overrated. I don't think his music is as important as we would have it be. I remember reading not long ago, and I'll stop flogging this horse in a moment. He's been compared now to Aaron Copeland, the Copeland of our time. If your students know who Aaron Copeland is, Copeland lived from 1900 to 1990, a brilliant American composer, a fellow Brooklynite, and he wrote a lot of populist music in the 30s during the Depression when the government was funding music that really became a model for what American concert music might sound like. But he's written tremendous number of other pieces that are not populist, and they're just a great freaking composer. I mean, Bob. So to compare Adams musically to Copeland is a disservice to Copeland. And we'll see. I mean, other overrated composers, well, if they were overrated in their time, they are unknown now, generally speaking. But I would say all of the serialists, for me, I mean, Pierre Boulez was a brilliant musician. But again, his compositions induce in me a suicidal urge. I had a teacher named Milton Babbitt when I was an undergraduate, a very famous serialist. But Milton, God bless him, could write a piece of music that sounded like music, even though it used the formulas. I still don't know how he did it. But, you know, Ernst Krenek, again, a well-known composer of his time, but one that I can't even fathom. And I'll stop now because this is what I hate doing. I don't want to criticize. I'd rather talk about those composers I feel who are underrated or who we should be listening to.
Fair enough, but it is kind of fun.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Providing someone takes me.
Kind of naughty.
Right. Okay. Well, how about this? Maybe this will shift a little bit, and this may be a question you don't want to dive into, or maybe it is. But we've been talking about the opera Carmen and doing a series of lectures on Carmen. And the reality of that libretto is that it is a French take on what the Spanish and the Gypsies are like, right? And today we have quite a bit of conversation about things like cultural appropriation and bad behavior. And what do we do with that? And what do you think, as we look back at historical pieces, that we do with not only perhaps that, because certainly there was a different way of looking at the world in that time period, but if you might even take it to what do we do with a composer who has exhibited some bad behavior, that for example, Richard Wagner, what do we do with his works, or what are maybe Abduction from the Seraglio, that you know has some things that might raise some eyebrows today. How do we approach that?
Context. We've got to take it in context. Let's talk about the Abduction from the Seraglio. Okay, it's a Mozart opera written in 1781, 82. It's about these Westerners taken prisoner by a pasha, who incidentally is also a Westerner, but has taken to Turkish ways. And the women have been abducted and put in the harem, which is what a seraglio is. And it's up to the men to go rescue the women. And the Turks, especially the overseer, who is a Turk, an Ottoman, is this total greaseball. Okay, yeah, this would look to be terribly non-PC, but now we've got to remember the Habsburg Empire, which was centered in Vienna and in Austria, which is where Mozart was from, had been at war on and off with the Ottoman Turks since the 1400s. The Ottomans were the traditional bad guys if you were an Austrian, and the Austrian were the traditional bad guys if you were an Ottoman. And one of the ways we deal with our enemies is to make fun of them. And I'm sorry, we do that to this day. I mean, I don't want to invoke such horrors as Hogan's Heroes and McHale's Navy, TV shows that I watched when I was a kid that made total fun of our enemies in World War II. But you've got to understand this portrait of the Ottoman Turks within the historical context of Mozart's time. Mozart's piece was in no way different from thousands, tens of thousands of other pieces of art, of music, of opera, of theater. And it was a way, you know, if you're afraid of someone and you can laugh at someone, you're less afraid of them. And that, we have to remember, Vienna was put to siege by Ottoman armies. One of the armies, Suleiman the Great, I mean, almost took Vienna back in the 1600s. This was huge. Vienna's walls were built to keep the Turks out. So we've got to understand it within the context of its time. And as soon as we get that, I think it clarifies many of the issues. Now, let's jump forward. Because, for example, Madame Butterfly by Puccini is an opera that's taken a lot of abuse right now, because Madame Butterfly is a Japanese geisha who falls in love with an American ship's captain named Pinkerton, who uses her services. He impregnates her. He promises to marry her, but of course he disappears and comes back to Japan after the baby is born with his white wife. Well, the portrayal of Butterfly, of Madame Butterfly, is terribly stereotypical of what you would imagine to be a docile Asian woman. The fact that she's often played by these big, fat white women doesn't really help. What are we to make of this? And I think what we have to make of it is, when it comes to opera, and this is important, these characters are archetypes. They're not individuals. They're representative of something larger. You want to talk about Carmen? The bullfight. This is, a toreador is an archetype of the ultimate man, a man who kills for a living, a man who will basically do, who is capable of all sorts of things most people are not capable of. So is Bizet making fun of the Spanish, or is he using an archetype because it serves a dramatic purpose? You know, in The Merchants of Venice, there are, I mean, if we look at Shakespeare, the way he uses Jews is really awful. Do we reject Shakespeare, or do we understand the archetypal nature of the characters, number one, and take it within the context of his time? One step further, you brought up Wagner. All right, unlike Puccini, unlike Georges Bizet, Wagner was personally a pig. Okay, he was one of the most despicable human beings of all time. He was crazy, I think. I mean, he had nuts lost, but he was also a visionary genius of almost unequaled power and capability. Do we deny ourselves the unbelievable joys of his work, even while we admit that in The Ring of the Nibelung, the four-evening masterwork of his, again, his depiction of Jews as the Nibelung, as the dwarves, is despicable. His depiction of Jews in Parsifal, which is his last work, pornographic. But they're works of genius. So how do we cope with that? This is how I do it. He's dead. So if I say something nice about Wagner, It can't improve his life at all. If he was still alive, I would boycott him entirely. But death does something as far as I'm concerned. It takes the personal out of it. And so I can say, yes, he was a despicable human being, was also a visionary genius, and I'm not going to deny myself the genius because he was a jerk. If he was still alive, I would deny myself the genius because somehow he might profit from my support. So there's the lie I tell myself. And I think we all have to come up with a way of dealing with these issues because, you know, if we look underneath the covers at anybody, we're going to find things about that person that we don't like. Every one of us has made mistakes. Every one of us has done something we shouldn't have done, said something we shouldn't have said. And if truly you could find someone who's crystal clean, it's probably the most boring person in the whole world. So I'm glad I'm not in academia right now. You guys are having to deal with a pile of issues that you have to deal with, but there are no easy answers for it. And I think what's really called for is a cool head and a forgiving mind. And a lot of people here are neither cool nor forgiving when it comes to these issues. And but just having said it, I mean, Carmen is such an amazing opera. It's such a brilliant piece of work. Are we to deny ourselves that because of this idea of cultural borrowing? I mean, I can't imagine life without Carmen, honestly. It's one of my top 3 or 4 favorite operas. And it killed poor Bizet. I mean, I'm sure you've talked about this. He died, if he died of anything, he died of a broken heart because he thought it had been, you know, he thought it was a failure. Poor dude. Is there a French composer that didn't write a Capriccio Espagnol type piece in those days? And the answer is no. I mean, is there a jazz player who hasn't done a Portraits of Spain or like Chick Corea, all his Spanish tinged music and so forth? Everyone loves the Phrygian mode. Everyone loves that exotic Andalusian sound of flamenco. We're still culturally borrowing from Spain to this day. Again, what's permissible, what's not permissible, and why should any of it be impermissible? That's my question. I would like to ask all of your students that question. If we are a single species, if we are a global community, if we are stronger as a group than we are as individuals, and I believe that to be true, then where is the sin? Is it cultural appropriation, or is it showing respect for something that rings your chimes? If someone could differentiate that for me, I'd be really grateful.
Explain that again.
Agree.
Dr. Greenberg, say that again.
What's called cultural appropriation, I understand at its most extreme. Appropriation is when someone of one race or one ethnicity takes something from another and makes a big buck off of it. Okay, and this pisses people off. And I can understand that. If I started wearing dreadlocks and started wandering around as if I was Bob Marley's, you know, missing son, and profited off of that, I could see someone saying, hey, you know what, knock it off. That's not appropriate. But if I hear something in Bob Marley's music that I think is fascinating and brilliant, and I want to find some way to bring that spirit into my composition, that's not appropriation to me. That's the respect that you show by imitation. And, you know, that's the old line, you know, imitation is respect. That's how all artists work, by imitating and by borrowing. So where's the line between appropriation and showing respect for someone else's culture by bringing that in? I mean, I'm a jazz piano player and I'm a good one, but I'm a white kid from Brooklyn, New York, who spent the last 43 years living in the Bay Area. I mean, is that appropriation? How about a Japanese who plays rock and roll? Rock and roll is a music that grew up in the United States, a combination of African and Western influences. Should an Asian be playing rock and roll?
Well, here's my problem with that. It seems that that was kind of, it was the in thing to go after the Turks, go after the minorities, go after the Easterners, make fun of them, poke them down. And it wasn't Bizet doing the same thing? Wasn't he just, it was a fad and everybody's doing it. I've got to do it.
No, I don't think so. I honestly, I don't. And by the way, the Ottoman Empire was much bigger than the Habsburg Empire. The Ottomans were the dominant Western empire for about 400 years. So in fact, it would be like, it would be like Guatemala making fun of the United States. It was a very, they were not an inferior people. They were in many ways a superior people, both in terms of their artistry and
I'm sorry. I'm talking about composers. That they're all making fun. Mozart made fun of them. Name them. They were all making fun. It was this inverse make me feel better by poking fun at those guys.
Well, in the case of the Abduction, yes, but not in the case of his A major piano sonata that ends with that wonderful yum bum bum yum bum da dum bum da 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 dum with the Turkish rondo, and certainly not in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with his Turkish march, where he turns the Ode to Joy melody into a Turkish march. Da-dum, ba-dim, ba-dum, ba-dum. He's not making fun. He's universalizing his music by going beyond the borders of Vienna and even Austria, by invoking a neighbor empire, and in doing so, universalizing what he says. To me, that's not making fun at all. To me, that's using all of the tools you've got, all of the surroundings you've got, and unifying them in such a way that it's larger than the sum of the parts. And I think this is where we have to be careful of superimposing our own kind of standards, our own way of thinking. Oh, it's got to be, you're right, it must be a satire. It must be a parody. No, I don't believe that to be true. I don't believe that to be true at all. This is what happens. Composers, writers, visual artists, if something strikes them, they find a way to use it in their own material. And so in the case of the Seraglio, I will agree with you. That's using the Turks as baddies, because if you were an Austrian in 1780s, the Turks were the bad guys. But I think, again, cultural appropriation in Bizet, I don't see it. And let's remember something: France and Spain are neighbor nations. They're right next to each other, and there's always been tremendous exchange between them. You would hear, Isaac Albini, who, as far as I'm concerned, wrote some of the greatest Spanish music. And of course, he's a native Spaniard. But Isaac Albini, who is from Catalonia in northern Spain, was influenced by the Andalusian music of southern Spain. And he lived in Paris and wrote most of his great music, like Iberia, while living in Paris. So the Parisians were surrounded by Spanish music right in their own community. So again, is Bizet copying the Andalusians, or is he actually being influenced by Isaac Albini and other Spanish composers living right there, cheek by jowl with them in Paris? This is why it just seems to me a dead end to criticize this. These folks are no different than me using jazz rhythms in my music today. It's part of my environment. Hey, listen, this is why I could never live anywhere else. One of the reasons why I adore the Bay Area. I'm from New York. I could never go back. We got better air. We got better scenery. We got better everything. And we still have that wonderful cultural variety here that you just can't find anywhere else except maybe New Orleans. Everything is happening here. You can hear everything. If I go to La Peña and salsa dance, and it turns me on, it's my backyard. That's Oaktown. That's okay to do that. So it's not appropriation as far as I'm concerned. It's sharing the wealth. and finding what's common between us. So
just to add to what you're saying, the reviews when Carmen premiered in Madrid were that Bizet had captured Spanish music fairly well, and the Spanish public was pretty happy with what Bizet was doing. The complaints were more about the libretto, right? And the complaints today seem almost ridiculous. Like some of them, I can remember one was, well, at the end of the opera, there Escamillo kills the bull and comes out and finds Carmen dead there, right, with Don Jose standing over with the knife. So they say, well, that's ridiculous because everybody knows a bullfight, there's not just one bullfight, you have 6 or 7 or 10 bullfights, right? They know nothing about the Spanish. And so, there are these gradations, there's these gray areas of, like, today, looking through a lens of today, that seems, and I think probably back then as well, that seems kind of a ridiculous complaint. But then we also have the association of the way the gypsies were treated and all of that. So yeah, it is a very difficult question as we take a look at all of this. I wonder about nationalism a little bit, how you feel. I know it to me seems like a transitional place that we needed to come through. Is there a place for nationalism in music today, or is that something of the past? And if there is a place for it, how do you see that? And maybe when does it go too far, if it does?
There's a certain degree of nationalism that's absolutely unavoidable. And that's what I think of as pure nationalism, and that is music that follows the cadence and rhythms of your native tongue. If you're being honest musically, and you're a Czech, or let's make it even more extreme, a Hungarian. Hungarian is a Finno-Ugric language in which the first syllable of every word is accented, always the first syllable. And it kind of sounds like Captain James Kirk, because that's the way Kirk accented every first syllable. Music, Hungarian folk music, and Bartók and Kodály and these 20th century nationalist Hungarian composers exploited this, and you hear it in their music. You hear these very highly etched rhythms and very often asymmetrical rhythms, because boom, 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 you're hearing an accent. French composers tend to write these long, languorous melodies and these very slowly changing harmonies. Well, that's the nature of the French language. It's all diphthong, it's all vowel, and very little harsh articulation. German and English, I mean, good night in German, guten Nacht. In English, good night. In Italian, or in French, bonsoir. In Italian, buonasera. Italian is the perfect language, by the way. It's the Goldilocks of language. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's not too sharp, it's not too languorous. You have a perfect balance of vowel and consonant. Well, this level of nationalism, where your home language, your native language, informs your way of thinking, melodically, harmonically, structurally even. Why would we ever want to shake that? Because that identifies who and what we are. And in the case of a certain level of genius, like Mozart, for example, who wrote so many operatic masterworks in the Italian language, well, that just shows what a brilliant linguist he was. So there's a kind of nationalism that we'll never, and we don't want to lose. But if we're using nationalism as a propagandistic tool, well, I'm not sure that has a place in our world today. If your attempt is to glorify your nation above others, one of the reasons why we had this huge spurt of intellectual modernism after World War II, after 1945, was because many young Western composers said, listen, nationalism and romanticism, which celebrated feeling over rationality, is how we got into this mess, how we got into this whole fascistic Nazi mess in the first place, is we were valuing nationalism, that is a national spirit, and feeling over rational thought above all things. And it allowed demagogues to evolve. And we're not going to go there right now when it comes to demagogues. But music can be used as a powerful propagandistic tool. The Soviets did it to the very end of their empire in, 1991. That's a kind of nationalism I would be wary of, to be honest with you. But again, everything in context. I don't think anyone's writing music like that right now. And, strutting German music or this or that. There's just no place for it anymore. So again, I wouldn't want to object to anything in theory unless I heard it and felt, if someone wrote an opera today about the superiority of the German people or the French people or the Spanish people or the Japanese people as being greater than others, that would be very problematic. But that's not happening anymore. But it did in the 19th century.
I'd like to go to just a couple of questions here because we're heading into the end of our hour together. And but first, Bob, do you have a favorite cookie?
Chocolate chip. Absolutely.
Chocolate chip. It is
peanut butter chocolate chip.
Thank you. Peanut butter chocolate chip is the code word for tonight. Also, I'd like a 250 words synopsis, or just on any topic that we've talked about. You can give me 250 words of something to let me know that you were here and paying attention. Yeah. Okay. So here's a question. What do you think about popular music today? From one of our students, I'm not sure who said.
Well, I'm gonna plead tremendous ignorance as to most popular music today. I've got as I said before, I've got 34-year-old daughter and a 30-year-old son. So when they were teenagers, I knew their music. Now I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. My son listens to a lot of stuff and he's shared it with me, and it's just gone in. My capacity for popular music was used up by my older kids. So what do I think of it? Listen, what I see of it is that it's beautifully produced. And right now so much of it is about packaging and production values. I'm very impressed by the musicianship, although when it comes to the singers, a lot of that happens to be auto-tune. But it's so varied what's out there now. When I was growing up, I sound like an old fart now. When I was a lad, but it was like having 3 channels on the television. There was a limited amount of information out there. You were either listening to rock and roll, pop, or folk, and there was only one kind of rock and roll. I now look at the categories for Grammys, and my eyes cross, and I get faint. There's so many different kinds of music out there, and there's so many different kinds of things being done. And of course, because of the internet, we have access to all of it. So what I would ask, coming back, is what constitutes pop music today? What varieties of music are we talking about? And I'm sincere. Would someone answer that for me? How would we define pop music today?
That would be a tough question to answer. I think that might be a good thing for someone to write. Here's another question. Is it true that certain frequencies help with mental health?
I'm clueless.
I don't know that either. I mean, I know that there have been some studies that people see colors with certain frequencies, and then there have been other studies that have sort of disproved that, and then other people say, no, that's wrong. But I don't know, what's that called? Synesthesia, I think.
Yeah, right, synesthesia.
Thank you. So, but I don't know about mental health and what your best notes are for that. All right, here's one more. Where could we listen to some of your jazz music?
Well, unfortunately, my dad, if you can come here and hang out with me and listen to me play the piano. If you want to hear my compositions, they're all over the web. I've got a YouTube channel, and if you go to my website, robertgreenbergmusic.com, I've got uploaded all my compositions and my scores and program notes and such, and they can be heard there. And I'm also posting on Patreon, for example, as I write these new pieces, I'm posting them and very good MIDI realizations along with the score on Patreon. This is my audience now. I've got my following, and if I can't concertize, they might as well be tortured while they're sitting at home on their computer with my stuff. So if you just Google my name, Robert Greenberg, you'll come up with stuff, and you'll find my YouTube site, or go to my website, or if you want to spend a few bucks, go to Patreon.
How often are you posting on Patreon?
5 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, some days, a lot.
Some days 6 days a week. This week 6 days. Yeah.
Well, I follow you. I enjoy it. I always find out something that I didn't know. So thank you for doing that.
My great pleasure. Thank you for reading it.
Everyone, this is the end of the hour for us. And please help me thank Dr. Bob for being here with us tonight and his enormous patience with my questions. And
I'm a huge fan. I love your performance tapes.
Thank you. There's over, I would say, this teaching company stuff. I've been making these recordings since '93, and there are over 700 lectures now, 45 minutes long each. So I don't know what that figures out to hours, but it's like crazy.
You can sign up for school starting in January, I think, and you can get like $6,000 in loans to help you get a place.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Something happened there.
But you're right up there next to Lenny Bernstein's and the young people's concerts.
You are Susan. Thank you.
No, I'm curious. I've got all those, and I have yours, and I use it in my music history class. So
I grew up with those things. My Aunt Pat gave me the package on 45 RPM records and then a book, and I mean that's my background. So thank you. That's the highest compliment I can be given. Actually, the highest compliment. I will finish with this, if you don't mind, because you read this in the intro. The Bangor, Maine Daily News, back in 2003, called me the Elvis of music history and appreciation, and I was feeling real good about myself when that happened. And I went down to dinner, and this is when my oldest kids, my daughter was 13. My son was 13 and my daughter was 16. And I sat down and I said, guys, the Bangor Daily News called me the Elvis of music history and appreciation. How about that? And my son doesn't even look up from his plate. He goes, that's like Bangor, Maine, Dad? And I said, yeah. He goes, was that the good Memphis Elvis or the fat Vegas Elvis? And then my daughter, without missing a beat, says, the fat one, the pathetic one, the one that died sitting on the toilet.
Oh, God.
So my wife is like really annoyed with them. But I was proud because you know what? My kids knew their Elvis.
Thank you for calling Marion Hilbert Center. My name is Sarah. Are you calling to place an order?
Okay, may need to kick somebody out here.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. Okay, thank you again. And I will hang out here for a while if anyone has anything else.
Thanks, Dr. Greenberg. Great.
My pleasure, Susan. Take care. Be well, everybody.
You as well.
It was nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Bye, Professor. Have a good
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephen.
It was a pleasure. It was a really
pleasure.
nice discussion. And you took all those hard balls and just knocked them out of the park.
Yeah. As long as I'm among friends, we're fine. As long as no one's throwing things at me.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, sometimes that's good. It's good to get some kind of reaction, right?
Well, it keeps me quick on my feet. Yeah. That's why we all wear black, right? Musicians.
Oh, man.
We can disappear into the night.
So are you doing some recording now or?
No, I was supposed to be in Vienna We were going to record a course on site in Vienna. It was so exciting. We had everything in place, and we were going to be recording in June when the days were at their longest. And of course, that was canceled. And I know they're recording in the studios in Virginia right now, but we can't do anything like that probably for at least another year, 2 years would be my guess, 2022. So no, it's terrifying, isn't it? It's a black hole. It's just a black hole.
It really is. I fear for how much is going to be lost in the arts and my fellow musicians. And I see everybody retooling and trying to move into something else because who knows when this, and of course they can't support themselves for much longer.
Are you still playing the trombone?
Well, I mean, before everything shut down, I freelanced and I did all of that. And, but yeah. So there was a lot of work that I lost this year, but and conducting, of course, I lost my whole string of nutcrackers this year, which is unfortunate, but maybe it's not unfortunate.
Yep.
So yeah, there's some of that that's gone. And then, I do some adjudications and other things like that. And so, yeah, but I'm one of the lucky ones, really. I mean, I have a college position, and we're doing everything remote, and they've told us we're out until next fall. So this will be like this for the spring semester too.
Yeah, everyone's canceling for the rest of the year, and rightly so. Rightly so. We're not going to have a vaccine until next summer, I don't think.
Yeah.
And it's just getting worse, and we're lucky. Again, we're so lucky here in California in the Bay Area. Our leadership was good, and our climate's good, and we're just not getting sick at the same rate others are.
Yeah, I agree. And at least here we can get outside. I mean, it's November, and we can go outside and take a hike up in the East Bay Hills or something. I can imagine being in an apartment in New York and
in an elevator.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, I owe you a beer.
Yeah, you do, and I'm going to drink it.
Okay. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
You take care. I'm going to head out and go get some dinner.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Steve. Bye-bye.
I got a question, Professor.
Go, Saman.
Hi. What is your favorite cookie?
What's my favorite cookie? That is a good question. I like, it might seem boring, but I really like shortbread cookies with a cup of very dark coffee. Just that whole dynamic does it for me.
Okay, I can do that. I can use some actually.
You like the shortbread cookies too?
Well, I eat everything that moves. So this thing doesn't move, but sounds moving to me.
Yeah.
I've met you a couple of times, more than a couple of times in the American River College at the music section.
Yeah.
We were doing theaters. I'm not sure if you remember me.
I do. I do remember you. Yes.
Yep. And then we had something like the same class with the Dr. Lapierre. Yeah, it was a very good experience.
Yeah.
And and then my sister introduced me to your class, and I said, okay, I want to take it. So,
it's good to have you here. It's always interesting to me to read what students post up about these lectures, and it's been great feedback. So, which class are you in, Simon?
I'm this semester the only music class I have is yours.
Mm-hmm. Is it introduction to music or basic musicianship?
No, it's just your class. It's the first one.
Oh, intro to music.
Yeah, it's the first one, and looks like it's a history kind of music. Yeah, it's about history. So that's why I like it, because you talk about all of this stuff. The other classes that I had before years ago, they didn't talk about they didn't cover everything. So right now, this person was talking about the Turks.
Right.
That was really interesting.
Yeah.
Other places they don't talk about all of the whole thing.
You know what? His lecture on the abduction from the Seraglio on the Great Lectures, you would love it. I think it is a great lecture, and it talks all about the Ottoman Empire and the involvement with that conflict with the Austrians, which is a very long conflict, and it's a long lecture too. I think it's an hour and a half or something, but it's fascinating. I just drove across the country a few weeks ago, and I was listening to that, and yeah, it was great. So check that out if you ever
Yep.
get the chance.
What was the lecture's name?
It's called the Great Lectures, and it's the one he does on the opera. It's a Mozart opera called "The Abduction from the Seraglio."
Okay. I will definitely check it out.
Yeah. Let me know what you think.
It's too bad that this thing happened to the world and we cannot go and then sing. So that's really. I was planning to take the jazz class and be part of the jazz thing they have, and this happened and
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Yeah. It's tough all around, and I really feel for you guys. Most of you guys um, are just most of you are pretty young and working to better yourselves in your careers, and this is a very special time in your lives, and it's really I have my sons are this age, and I see what they're missing out on compared to what my experience was and what the experience was before the pandemic. And so I feel for you guys. It's like this little piece of time that has been taken away from you. So hopefully you'll be able to retread that once this resolves.
Hopefully, yeah. If they don't destroy the world more.
Oh yeah, well
Yeah.
let's be optimistic that won't happen.
Well, let's hope that never happens. Yeah.
Okay.
Professor.
Hi, Veronica.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, awesome. Quick question on the 250 word cover on today's lecture. Do we submit that in the same assignment or not? Because I already submitted the attendance word, and I was just wondering where would the 250 word
Yeah,
go?
it goes to the same place. Just
In the
just
same
give
place?
me just give me 250 words on something we talked about tonight, and you don't have to try to cover the whole thing, but pick something.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too. Hello, Ana, Esperanza, Stanley, Yuri. Anybody have a question? Or maybe you're off watching
Probably it's
something and you just left it on.
why.
Hello,
Just
Yuri.
about the lesson, yeah, I enjoyed it, but
He was good, huh?
speaking so fast, but I
Yeah.
almost got everything.
Well, it's tough when
It's
that's
very emotional to speak and just to make images, many images, historian images from himself, just as a historian. He has very unusual platform to be a composer.
yes. He's a
from composer's platform.
he's an interesting
Yeah.
person, and very smart, and but I think what's great about him is that he's relatable. He's someone you could sit down with and have dinner and have a nice conversation and not feel like he was talking down to you. Or I mean, it's really apparent he's very intelligent and knows a lot more than I do, but he would never make you feel that way, and that's the kind of the person I like to be around. And it was very nice of him to come in and talk with us.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Talks fast too, especially if English is your second language, right?
I just got used to your talking, but I was getting his talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was kind of lost too. So I was asking you about the hypnosis, but the other question already cleared it up. Like we can just pick one topic, right?
Oh yeah, just pick something. Just
Okay.
let me know that you were here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. T.
Thank you, Esperanza.
Okay, Steve. Bye bye. See you next time.
uh, oh, Anna, I saw you pop on here for a minute. Did you have a question? Anya? Oh, there you are. Oh, I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was very interestingly.
Oh, I hear you now. Thank you. Yeah. What did you think?
I think it's very important to put cultural in the music because it's a part of our life.
Mm. And what kind of music do you listen to most of the time, Anya?
Any music,
Yeah.
classic, jazz, blues sometimes. What else? Pop sometimes.
Yeah.
I love music. I love any type of music. Not a metallic rock. I love rock, but not a metallic rock.
Not metal.
It's blowing my mind.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you.
Yeah.
Dubstep and all that. I like a lot of that too, and I'm always trying to kind of catch up. I feel like I'm always catching up because, and there were certain pockets of time that I missed. Like when I was a student at the university, I really was focused on classical music, right? That's what I was doing. So I missed really about 10 years of pop music, and I keep trying to go back and figure all of that out. And in fact, I know more about today's music than I do from 90s music, because that was sort of that time when I just checked out of everything else, unfortunately, because there was a lot of great music from that era.
Yeah. But, and there is an interesting fact about me that I born in a 80th century music, like Beatles, ABBA.
Oh yeah,
love them.
We were just singing ABBA in the car the other day. Two boys were riding in the car when they start singing Dancing Queen. They were singing Dancing Queen. Yeah. I thought, what's going on here?
That's a great movie.
Yeah. Where's your family from? Where?
Armenia.
Armenian. Is ABBA big in Armenia, or was it?
Yeah, my father was a musician. Yeah, he played on the piano, jazz music, and all of stuff, classic, and kind of we listen that music all the time.
Yeah.
Like Louis Armstrong. I can many type of composers and other stuff.
What city did you grow up in?
Yerevan.
Oh, and is there a big music scene there?
Yeah. You know Khachaturian?
I don't. Is that?
Yeah, it's a big musician, especially known in Russia.
Oh, okay.
Also,
will you send me a YouTube link so I can hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like that. I always find new artists I never heard of, so that would be great.
He's very popular. Actually, we have a lot of popular compositors, but not in US, I think. And also Charles Aznavour, you know Charles Aznavour?
I don't. Here's another one.
Yeah, you know Cher?
Of course.
Cher is Armenian. She's Armenian.
Really? Is she?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Wow. You know, I used to live in Glendale, which had a huge Armenian community when I lived in Los Angeles.
Mini
And
Armenia.
what's that?
It's a like mini Armenia.
Oh, mini Armenia. Yeah, and I had a good friend, a trombone player. We played a lot of. We worked a lot together, and it was Armenian, and he was always taking me out to good restaurants and all that. I miss that. That was really fun being down there. Is there an Armenian community in Sacramento?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Not that big. That in a Glendale, but here maybe 3,000 people.
Oh yeah, well, not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a community, do you have a like a church that is kind of keeps the community together and all of that? And that seemed to be, you know, in Glendale, that was really the
Glendale
thing.
is a big church, like exactly Armenian church. Here, kind of place similar with church, but not a church, not like architecture church.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Any good Armenian restaurants in Sacramento?
No. Zero.
Too bad. Well, there you go.
There is an interesting fact that all Armenian here like either pizza, either sushi. There is no Armenian restaurant.
I would not imagine that sushi is a food that you find often in Armenia. Is that right? Or
right now, yes, it's very popular.
Oh yeah. How about pizza? Is pizza popular in Armenia?
Yes.
It's popular everywhere in the world, isn't it? I used to live in Japan, and so they had pizza place. I could speak a little bit, but not very well. And I used to go to these pizza places in Japan, and they would put things like dried fish flakes and corn on top. Things that we in America you would never, of course, think about. But it was good. I enjoyed it.
In my country, we have pizza with jam.
With jam?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, you know, like I've had pizza in Italian restaurants here that are like a fig jam and like a cheese or something like that, like a feta or something, which is pretty good. What kind of jam do they put on the pizza?
Apricot.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, with Nutella. We have also pizza
Nutella.
with
That's
Armenian
like,
people like sweet.
That's a dessert pizza right there. Yeah. That sounds great. Wow. Well, okay.
Music, that's a life. That's
yes.
I don't know. Without music, nothing can be right.
Yes. Oh, let's see. So much
for conversation.
Thank you. It's good talking with you. So, and I hope to see you next time. We have one more.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Have a good evening, Anna.
You too.
Okay. Bye. Hi, Kate.
Hey there.
I suppose that when I end the Zoom session, it will just end the recording. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you've done before, and since I hit record on my end, I just had this little faint feeling of unease.
Oh, you know what? Right here it says stop recording. I'll just do it. Here we go. Boom.